Welcome to the first unprofessional episode, and there'll be more of these, of the engine bores. As you can see, we have an empty seat today. This is due to the fact that Ed is still on holiday. He's always on holiday, or detailing some F40 for a multi-millionaire down on the south of France, on the Riviera in the south of France. Anyway, to no avail, you've got the engine bore at the moment, and I'm just going to go over a few little points about how to brew a proper cup of Carrera tea. You obviously saw the title, you know what it's about. And Ed's probably, he is well aware of the proposition because he's seen the pilot of this already. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we're just going to tell you why I've not driven a 991.2 Carrera T, I hasten to add, but plenty of people now are coming out of the woodwork, all the way from Nick Murray, who's our Kiwi in Connecticut, does a lot of stuff on Porsche, particularly, all the way through to the usual great and the good of the journalist motoring world, like Henry Catchpole on whatever it is he's appearing on, Carfection, For the Love of Cars, Motor One, Evo. The man's got a great agent. There are many, many others as well that are now getting their hands on the Carrera T. So I'm not going to tell you what it drives like, because it drives exactly like a Carrera, but it's got a diff, PTV, and that slightly contradictory final drive ratio of the Carrera S, but more of that in a moment. So, what is the Carrera T as far as I'm concerned? This is the 991.2, of course. This is not the historic Carrera T of 1969. Some say 67, but I think it's 1969 vintage. What is the T? Well, it's a very good question. I'm going to lob my little conspiratorial hand grenade into the conversation almost immediately by saying I don't think it started off as a Carrera T at all. I think it started off as some kind of concept, because this is not, in my view anyway, an incremental car in the range of 911 that we are now pretty much used to, certainly since the 997.2 where they introduced the GTS. So now we have a clear logical step up increment of price and indeed performance, depending how you define performance, of course. Certainly not necessarily fun, but anyway, we've got this increment, as I've said, of Carrera S, GTS, the body variants. And by the way, this is just about production cars. We're not going to venture into the dark web world of Herr Preuninger, where, I don't know, you have to be a member of the equivalent of Roberto Calvi's P2 Lodger, bearing a brown envelope to get hold of a GT car. This is certainly for the UK market. It might differ for the US, from the US rather, Canada, and obviously the continent, and Australia and the world beyond, where you can also buy Porsche products. Anyway, I think the Carrera T, for me, as I said, didn't really start off as a Carrera T per se. I think they plucked that name out of the range, out of the archives, because it was a convenient way of scouting around what was the initial goal. And certainly it seems still the marketing hype that surrounded the Carrera T, and still does, was about a car that was more essence of 911. For what I would refer to as the 911 nobodies like me. I own a 991.2. I suppose I could write a check for a 911R if they were still selling them for RRP, or indeed a 991.2 GT3. But you can't get hold of them because I'm not a VIP of the 21st century. V standing for very in the 20th century, but now in the 21st century it stands for valuable important person rather than very important person. Anyway, we'll probably do a video on the whole world of how people get into the seat, the driver's seat, and ownership of GT series cars. Lots of stuff has been done on this. JM, I think, he's the Lotus-centric chap. James, don't know his surname, he's done a piece on this recently, but we're concentrating on a Carrera T, or what has turned out to be Carrera T. Now, I think originally they, at the time of developing Dot 2, which is a good 3 to 4 years ago, not the release, but when they're developing it, how they're going to change the range a bit, various options. Obviously there's the change of the bi-turbo engine, which was a big change. And someone said, look, 911R, not the 70s one, the 2016 911R, 2015, 2016. What does it mean? Well, it encapsulates everything that is great about Porsche, and it did encapsulate quite a few negative things. I think whilst functionally it was a superlative car, it was a bit of a PR disaster. I guess only the Germans could think that 991 models or units was a bit of a Swabian joke that most of the world didn't really get. A lot of people were pissed off by the whole thing, couldn't get a car. And these are, unlike myself, I don't have a track record of buying 911 since the age of 15. There are plenty of people that have that record and for whatever reason didn't get hold of one. So it did prove to be, as I said, a bit of a PR own goal. And I was expecting, when I heard rumours of a more essential, more back to basic 911, which was at the time, I think, of the Geneva show, March, Q1 2017, that this was going to be a production car and purer. The word, the Germans use this word, puristische or puristisch, puristic. It's the adjective of the word purist. One clearly has one's appetite whetted. When lots of ones there, when Zuffenhausen say we're bringing out their production, not Mr. Preuninger's oeuvre, this is production, but we're bringing out a production 911 for the purist. Therefore we ascribe the adjective puristic to it. Great. Now, I guess we can be a bit self-delusional and rush headforth into all kinds of speculation, thinking this was going to be a stripped out, back to basics 911. But nonetheless, if someone says we're going to produce a puristic 911 for production, for the ordinary, for the Porsche plebs, like myself, then, it's forgivable that you think, well, this is going to be something that is more basic, purer, puristic, let's face it, lighter, and something that's a bit rawer, something that's pared back a little bit. Now, if I were doing that kind of 911 for production, and I knew that I was being, I'm not going to say hobbled, but limited by the bi-turbo engine, and more particularly because I think the bi-turbo engine is a little bit maligned. I think it's an excellent engine. I've driven a 3.4 991.1 and a Carrera 991.2 manual. Really is a superior car in many ways, not just in terms of torque, outright performance, but its steering's better, its gearbox is better, its clutch is better. The triumvirate of clutch, gearbox and steering is just way better. It is a better car pretty much on every front, and even cosmetically, in my view, better. So bi-turbo engine and is not hobbling the car at all. 7-speed gearbox, manual, slightly different matter. We'll come on to that. But nonetheless, if you were starting off with a Carrera and you were wanting to, the current Carrera, and you were wanting to make that into this puristic car, I found the T really quite confusing. The more I dug into it, the more I found the whole thing conflicting. We have a component, Gorilla Glass, taken off the daddy of them all, GT2 RS. Fantastic, just add lightness. Hey, that appeals to the Brits. Very Colin Chapman-esque. And then it all went sadly wrong. Where was the continuation of this logic of adding lightness to the T? As far as I'm concerned, it just didn't happen. It just got heavier and heavier, to the point that really it's only 5 kilos lighter than a Carrera. And in the real world, once you have a mildly optioned Carrera, and one hopes a mildly optioned Carrera T, there's probably nothing in it. You might even find the Carrera T, and there's some, oddly enough, there's lots of price and application Carrera Ts swilling around the OPC used network, and they're heavily specified, and I think a few speculator specifiers have caught a bit of a cold, because it's a car, in my opinion, the Carrera T that is in its present guise, that should be lightly optioned, not heavily optioned. Anyway, I think the Carrera T in concept started off as a 911L, L being standing for Leicht, which I'm reliably informed is German for light. Then I discovered that maybe that was a bit too difficult, a bit too risky, and they made the T instead and selected a moniker, the T, which, let's face it, no one under the age of 60 can really remember it very well. There's no one on the planet under the age of 75 that's ever walked into a Porsche dealership anywhere in the world and bought themselves a Carrera T. So it's probably a pretty wise move to use that name, because no one bloody well knows what the hell the thing was. You do a bit of digging and you find out that the original T was, in my view, some disagree with me, but I think it was, before they invented the phrase, a decontented 911. It had, I think, an iron head on its engine block rather than a composite aluminium. I think it was Nicosil, or whatever the S was using at the time. So it had a cheaper head, cheaper camshaft, smaller, therefore cheaper Weber carburetors. Compression ratio was lower. It was just a cheapened car. It was decontented before they invented the word decontenting, or the method. And nothing wrong with that. You've got to go. You're going back to a period when 911Ss were being sold against, 3.8 litre straight six Jaguar E-types. And I think if you want to maintain without dropping the price of a 911S or a 911E, then what do? Then you need to expand your production base so that your unit costs, your base unit costs for a 911 chassis is reduced. So you want more, literally, bums on seats. And I think that's why the 911T was created. Slight digression into the history of the T, and that's only my view. But it probably suits, as I said, using the T as a moniker for the 991, or moniker, whatever you call it, a name handle for the 991.2. If they called it the 911L, the Carrera L, hey, that would have been a real hostage to fortune, would it not? Because they would have had the Michael right rolly ripped out of them. You see, I'm being very self-censoring by not using Anglo-Saxon. I don't know why. I'm not working for the BBC. This is not going out on BBC One prime time before the watershed. Anyway, so let me brew you a proper cup of Carrera tea, and in so doing, that will illustrate why I think the Carrera tea that we have got is an opportunity missed. And I think, given the looming shape of 992 arriving very soon, I think it's going to be an historic opportunity missed. Because there's no question the 992 will be physically, dimensionally bigger. They say it's going to be more or less the same weight as Dot 2. Yeah, but once you start adding options, which you inevitably will, I'm not sure that's the case. Anyway, let's take a Carrera first of all. Carrera, the DIN, Deutsche Industrie Norma weight rating is 1,430 kilos. Now, if I just tick a box to complete the configuration of a manual, because I'm not putting PDK on my Carrera, on my imaginary Carrera, or indeed on my own Carrera, because it's also a manual, I'm just going to tick one box. I'm going to have a colour, Indis Rot, Guards Red, been going since the year dot. Tick. Drive out Zuffenhausen in my manual red, flat red Carrera. 1,430 kilos. I won't say on the road because I'm sitting in it, but DIN rated. Not EC, not with driver. I do exactly the same with the Carrera T. So I'm not ticking the box for PCM, even though I bought it, or rear seats. And yeah, driving out the Zuffenhausen's gates in my Carrera T in red, manual. Weight, 1,425 kilos. They're the figures that Porsche produce, official figures. I've saved 5 kilos. Then I go and have a big lunch, or I'm your average Chicagoan Carrera T driver rather than your average Roman Carrera T driver, and my car is heavier than a Roman in a Carrera as opposed to a Chicagoan in a Carrera T. No disrespect for Americans, by the way, they're just bigger people all round. So 5 kilos is neither here nor there, and that's why you wouldn't call it an L, because you would have the piss taken out of you. So that's why I think that they started off with a lightweight concept, realized that it was one, too risky and or too expensive, and walked away from that and just gave us a form of GTS Lite on the GTS riff on the Carrera rather than the GTS riff that we all know on the Carrera S, but without more power. So, and we don't get less weight either. So the only way that they can differentiate in terms of straight line performance, or performance per se, not going round bends and corners and what have you, is to give it a final drive ratio that's lower off the Carrera S. That's the only real advantage, mechanistically speaking, that the Carrera T has. So let's go back to the Carrera. I'm going to have my Carrera, 1,430 kilos, but this time I'm going to call it an i11L or Carrera L, whatever you want. But I'm not going to put PCM in, and I'm not going to put seats in, rear seats. And I'm not going to charge for it either. So I already have my differentiator. My 911L is at the moment slightly cheaper than my Carrera because I don't have my lovely PCM, which I can use for my tunes and my my Apple CarPlay, my sat nav, etc. So I'm not going to have that, and I'm going to have the rear seats. So I've saved however generous, which is pretty rare, Porsche AG want to be. I'm getting a car that's in Great British pounds. Maybe they'll give you £1,000 off, possibly a bit more than that, and they'll charge you £1,500 to put PCM back in, and God knows, £900 for the rear seats, possibly. Let's call it all in 1,800 quid. So I'm £1,800 richer, but I don't have PCM. But immediately I am lighter. What's a PCM and rear seats? Some say 7 kilos. I think it's probably a bit more. For just pure ease of arithmetics, let's call it 10 kilos. So now I've got a Carrera that's 1,420 kilos. I automatically, including GT3 RS, have the lightest lightest 991.2 in the entire range, including Mr. Poininger's lovely models. Already done that. Then I'm going to use what I think is the only really great idea on the T. I'm going to use the Gorilla Glass. Fantastic. Now, why would you buy a Carrera T and then add heated rear windscreen or rear screen or tints or rear wiper? What's the point? Just buy yourself an S. But anyway, we're going to be pure here because it is a car, is it not, for the purists? It's the production 911 purists car. So we add Gorilla Glass. Now, I've done a calculation. Somebody on Renlist said it's 8 kilos. Somebody, I thought it was about 6.3, 6.4 kilos. So we're going to go for 7 kilos as a kind of medium, or median rather, median weight saving. So I've now added Gorilla Glass and I'm now 17 kilos on aggregate less. So I now have a Carrera which weighs 1,413 kilos. And I've not done anything to it. I haven't added PTV, added a diff, added PSE, I haven't added the final drive ratio of the S. I've not done anything. I've just got a lighter Carrera. And I've also at the moment got a lighter Carrera at a high centre of gravity, which is exactly one of the key areas where you want to lose weight. Porsche 991.1 and .2 Targa owner's note. Anyway, moving on. I'm going to carry on this logic. I'm going to go and, because I'm Porsche and I'm making, well, what am I making? I'm making 32 to 33,000 cars, 911s a year now in .2. I'm going to do 10% in Carrera T. Excuse the noises off. And therefore, I'm making about 3,000 cars. T's, left-hand and right-hand drive. So last time I looked at my basic arithmetics, that is about 12,000 individual wheels split front and rear. A few spares, let's call it 13,000. Now if I ring up BBS, OZ, Von Metal, Eta Beta and all the host of other people that manufacture, particularly in northern Italy, and I say, look, I'd like 13,000 wheels. They may say, well, it's not a big production run for us. If I say I'd like them forged, then they'll say yes. For you, Mr. Porsche, 13,000 forged wheels, no problem. 20 inch? No. I want 19 inch. Oh, really? Yeah. I want a 19 inch forged wheel, front and back. I want 13,000 to 14,000 copies, units. And that's it. And I may have them in a celebrative, festive end of school term, end of 991.2 production colour or not. Doesn't really matter. Why do you want that, Mr. Porsche? Well, I want that because simply by adding a 19-inch forged wheel and clearly tyre combo onto my 911L, which is already at 1,413 kilos, I will save weight on my tyre, weight on my wheel, to the tune of approximately 10 kilos across the rear axle. Comfortably. Forged 19-inch, ET 66, 67, 11.5J, 11J to take that 295 tyre. That's going to be about 17.5 kilos, probably less. That is comfortably 4.5 kilos less than the cast flow 20-inch alloy wheel that you get on any of them, S, GTS, and including the wheel on the Carrera T. So time you've had tyre and wheel, you're saving 10 kilos across the rear axle and another 8 kilos across the front. Now if I then now take my 18 kilos front and back, say, because I've added forged 19-inch wheels and the relevant tyres, I've now got a Carrera which is less than 1,400 kilos DIN rated. I'm now into holy grail country. I'm at last got a car DIN rated, that's wet, with lubricants, with fuel, that's actually weighing less than 1,400 kilograms. You're kind of in McLaren territory, because McLaren always quote, a little bit misleadingly, they're dry weights. It's irrelevant. The amount of liquids you would need to put on a car to get DIN rating is a hell of a lot. I think it might even be 100 kilos, but getting on for that. So you've got to be well careful when people are quoting dry weights. But here I have now a Carrera, and I've just simply changed the glass. I've not included PCM rear seats at the moment, nor charged for them. And I've just put on a set of 19-inch forged wheels with obviously the relevant 19-inch tyres, which are 295 at the front. I think it's still 245 at the 295 at the rear and 245 at the front. And that's it. So that's I've now got the lightest by some margin 991.2 of all variants, including GT variants, GT cars. But I'm not going to stop there, because this is a celebration, isn't it not? It's end of school term. This is the 911L we're talking about. I'm going to go for ceramics. Now, I'm not sure of the weights of the new, is it the tungsten carbide, but the new carbide brakes that they put on the Mark III Cayenne, I believe. They sound really interesting. I don't know enough about them to quote that. But let's stick with PCCBs, the carbon ceramic brakes, the Porsche carbon ceramic brakes. They will save you at least another kilo a corner. I think is at least 5 across the car. So why can't Porsche give me a deal where I can have a tyre, wheel and brake combo for a set price? 10k for the whole lot. Now I know it's 6k alone currently. 6k, this is Great British pounds for the PCCBs. But this is, a run-out car, so maybe they can charge a bit more for the car and just give me a price for that. So now I've got a car that's comfortably under 1,400 kilos. I'm looking at a car that's in the region of 1,390 kilos. And all I've done is kept the glass, left the seats and the PCM out, and added lightness exactly where you want it, other than that high centre of gravity within the area of unsprung weight. Highly Colin Chapman-esque. This is what you want. Now, by so doing, having this 19-inch forged alloy wheel, I've killed many birds with one stone. I've reduced the overall weight of the car. Bonus. This is what we want for puristic production Porsches, do we not? I've also provided an immediate visual differentiator of that car over all other 911s, 901.2s, including, again, Herr Preuninger's output. No one's got forged in 19-inch. Therefore, it has to be the 911L or the Carrera T in your speak. So, light and weight, immediate differentiator. 3, perhaps less of an important point, but if you're someone like myself who's keen on driving abroad, you've got to go to Germany and access the autobahns to really get a feel for a production car in terms of its general use and being on maximum speed on autobahn, etc. Then you're probably going to go for, because even in the UK, although it's warm, it's pretty wet normally. So you're going to go for a winter tyre. Having a 19-inch winter and summer tyres that you can circulate or rotate on one 19-inch wheel is fine. It's good. You get more sidewall with 19-inch, and believe you me, I don't know where you live, but I live west of London, and we affectionately call this place Pothole Central. I like a good ride. I like the car to breathe a bit. I like a bit of steering feel. So, excuse me, having a 19-inch wheel and tyre combination is no disadvantage at all. The thing that you could maintain, which is the PASM Sport, I'm pretty sure that it's PASM Sport and the Carrera T. I don't think they actually make reference to it. They just say the springs are shorter and harder. That's PASM Sport in my book. You can keep that and you get your 10mm height reduction, which makes a 19-inch wheel look a little more cosmetically acceptable to the people that must have 20 and 21-inch wheels and that kind of thing. Personally, I like tyre sidewall. I think it gives the whole wheel and tyre combination a much more sculptural effect. But nonetheless, that's purely subjective. So, very simple. And there's one last thing. So I've already got my car down to 1,390 kilos. I have not put PCM and rear seats back in, I admit. If this is a run-out special, where's the option of me having a lithium-ion battery? Now, that may well cost £1,800. Or, if it's slightly subsidised because we're in a festive giveaway mood, £1,500. But I would seriously consider buying that because it would be the last part of the logic of me having a 911L or a Carrera T. Because that lithium-ion battery comfortably saves about 10 kilos against its lead-acid equivalent. I understand, for example, BMW performance parts, M Performance Parts have just brought out a lithium-ion battery for the BMW M2, and they are quoting a 14 kilogram saving, which set me back a bit. I thought that was extraordinary. So let's be conservative and call it 10. So there you go. You've saved 10 kilos with your PCM and rear seat combo, 7 kilos with the glass, 18 kilos with your 19-inch rubber, your 19-inch tyres and your 19-inch forged alloys. You've saved 5 kilos with your PCCBs all round. You've then saved another 10 kilos with your lithium-ion battery. You're now looking at a car that's coming in around about 1,380 kilograms DIN rated. Now, that's a fair old gain. And if I had my way, I would then move, and then I wouldn't go for final drive ratio. I know people will argue for that because it makes the car, by definition, slightly a feeling of greater responsiveness. But you do pay for it significantly, and I don't mean in the purchase of it. The 0 to 60 time, and I know it's not the final arbiter, I agree with that, but the 0 to 60 time between Carrera and Carrera T in manual is 0.1 of a second. That works out to be a 2% improvement in 0 to 60 time. Now go and look at the emissions. You go from 190 grams per kilometre to 215. That's a 13% or 13 plus % worsening of CO2 and therefore fuel consumption. Well, that to me is the wrong way around. Porsche tend to invest wisely and well and make a small adjustment to get a big payoff or a bigger payoff, not the other way around. That kind of me is anti-Porsche, and let's face it, this is a road car. It's not even, frankly, a track car. Would you get a Carrera T with PDK? Yeah, if you're going to track it. If you're going to get a manual, which is what you should be doing, because that's the whole essence, that's the zeitgeist, that's the whole shtick of buying a T, then you'd spec a manual. But if you're specing a manual, therefore, to use it on the track, you've got the wrong gearbox by a long chalk. 7-speed in .2, guys, is a better gearbox than on the 991, but .1. But it's not a track day gearbox. I have driven around Silverstone Porsche Experience Day in an S, admittedly, rather than a Carrera manual. I misslotted that box a few times. I own a 991.2. If you're in a hurry and in extremis and you're coming down from 7th into the other gears, then you've got a 30-40% chance of misslotting it, unless you're going slowly. There's that detent. It needs to go into a little bit of neutral before you pick a gear. And even moving up through the gearbox, I have gone, instead of into 3rd, I've gone into 5th. Now, true, that's in extremis, but that's what happens on a track. That 7-speeder is not a track day gearbox. If you want to, don't believe me, if Hurley Haywood, who, okay, he's knocking on, but he certainly knows his way around driving a Porsche or two, you watch him. I think it's Lee Sibley of Total 911, his passenger. Hurley Haywood's going down the corkscrew at Laguna Seca. He misslots. That's Hurley Haywood. So if he can get it wrong, I can get it wrong. And unless you're Mark Lieb or Kevin Estra, then you're going to get it wrong as well. So I just don't get why we are really going with this final drive ratio. Just keep it. I've got a lighter Carrera L now. I'm now 50 kilos lighter than my standard Carrera. I'd rather have the weight saving than I would a final drive ratio, which, as far as I'm concerned, spoils the balance of that kind of Swiss knife vibe you get with the Carrera, in .2 especially, which has more than enough performance for a manual car, but also is very much an everyday car. It is a good ownership proposition. I get 35 miles per gallon out of it very easily. I can hypermile and get 37, 38 miles per gallon out of it, and I'm still keeping up with traffic. Does that defeat the object of owning a 911? I don't think it does. It probably defeats the object of owning a GT3, but it's not a GT3. It's a production car. Last thing, Porsche, and this is why I think, as I said, it's an opportunity missed, is that this is end of 991.2. We're going into a 992 era where at some stage we're going to get some kind of hybridity, some kind of electrification. Therefore, the 991.2 may well, in retrospect, define some kind of zenith of the fossil fuel engine for production cars. Possibly, who knows? Possibly even for GT cars as well. So why on earth can't I have some celebratory colours? I don't want lava orange, even at just under 2k for it, whatever the price is, 1600, 1700, whatever. Who's going to buy that? Unless you've got a GT3 RS, don't get lava. It's got too much orange in, doesn't work as a colour. If you want an orange, you want bleu d'orange, you want the tangerine. And of course, it's a PTS colour, and the T is simply not special enough to have a PTS. Well, if it's not special enough to have a PTS because it's too confusing, give people two fixed colours that they can purchase. So instead of lava orange and Miami, and who's speccing Miami on a 911 as an owner specifier? I don't know. Apparently, Nick Murray was saying on the East Coast in the States, Miami is just not being taken up at all. So if you see a 911 in Miami on the East Coast in the States, it's a used car. Someone's bought that at a slightly discounted cost. So why can't we have two colours, which are specifically 911L? I keep on banging that drum, don't I? Or Carrera T. What about olive? The best product placement of a car I have seen on television in the last, I was going to say decade, probably 20 years, is that olive green G Series 911 that goes across the bridge between Sweden and Denmark in the Scandi noir thriller, whatever you call it, The Bridge. I don't know whether people get it stateside on HBO, but I'm sure it's sold internationally. That car is probably a bigger star than any of the people in it. Fantastic advert. I mean, the value of that advert for Porsche must be incalculable. Why can't we have, therefore, an olive green? And then a blue, maybe. Aussie, Albert, even aquamarine, although admittedly it's a 356 colour. Why can't we have that? And there you go. You've got a car that is 19-inch forged wheels, and it's clearly narrow-bodied, and it's got olive green as a colour. Oh yes, doesn't need a decal, doesn't need agate painted wing mirrors or the vanes, strakes, or whatever you want to call them on the rear deck grille. Doesn't need titanium coloured wheels. Doesn't need any of that. That is the T for sure. Oh look, it's a 991.2 in Aussie blue with 19-inch forged wheels, OEM forged wheels. Oh look, yeah, that's a T. If you want to put a frickin' decal down it, you can. It's not necessary. And I would leave PSE, PTV, diff if possible, PCM and rear seats on the option list. If you want it, you can have it. Frankly, I would have binned a PSE on 991.2. I don't think it's been a success at all. It's ovoid, it's the wrong, optically it doesn't work, and I'm not convinced that when you get over 4,000 RPM, you still get this kind of gas rush. I think it kind of spoils the intake sound that you still get on a 991.2, but that's only my personal view. Certainly not necessary as an £1,800 option. Just buy the twin tips for 500 quid. It looks better. It looks like a proper Porsche 911 anyway. Two exhausts on either side. But if they wanted to make it different, why couldn't they just take the rhomboid tips off the Carrera and stick a nice big round tip on? It may well mean that you need to change the rear valance. Not beyond the capabilities of Porsche. Yes, it's extra cost, but that would have really set off the visual differentiation of the 911T or my 911L from the rest of the range, so that you've got a rear end that looks like a 997.2 Sport Classic, which for me is one of the definitive modern day 911s for sheer looks. Not keen on the rear lights on 997.2, but that's not the matter. I still think the purity of 997.1 is better, but nonetheless, the rear end and the just balance of those Fuchs wheels, the colour on the Sport Classic works extremely well, and it's clearly reflected in the almost trebling of its price back from 2010 when it first came out. Why couldn't you do that, Porsche? So this is very simple, and you leave all the other shizzle on the options list. And one last thing, I don't want multifarious different types of insides, different leathers, different colours, different seats. Some guy, I think it's Motorman, he's a US guy who works out of an aircraft hangar, I believe. He's criticised as a sport. He didn't even know that's typical, I guess, because it's so rarely do you see sport techs in a US spec car that he didn't even know the name of it, understandably. But he said the sport text is pretty harsh, not a great fabric. Okay, but why don't they just take the grey pinstripe, which is an extra, and just make it standard? Grey goes with everything, and you just have that. And if you want to put an embroidered Carrera T or L in the rear head restraint and the centre armrest, even better. So we then have a standard Bogo standard interior, which is unique to the car. Two colours that are unique, plus all the usual, freebie colours of, Guards red, the white, the black, the yellow. That's fine. But one straightforward interior, unique to the car. Nice and simple. And then I've got a 911 Carrera T. I've got it in Aussie Blue. I've got 19-inch forged wheels. If Porsche could have pushed the boat out, I'll have 2 exhausts either side. Not necessarily enhancing sound-wise, because I think it'd be very interesting to see how 992 has improved this. But I don't think 991.2 is wholly successful with PSE. And that's it. You know, I've got my car that's now officially way the lightest out of all production and GT Porsches. I don't need the final drive ratio because I'm saving 50 kilos. And if I want to go back and add my PCM in and my rear seats, either at configuration or more pointedly and more cost efficiently in terms of supply, not in terms of purchase, I can get, because I can get my rear seat put in by my OPC 6 months down the line if the wife discovers that I've got a 2+2 without a rear seat and she's going to divorce me if I don't put the rear seat back in. Call the OPC. They haven't got to worry about what colour interior do you have, sir? It's a grey pinstripe. It's the T colour. It's the T interior. Easy to source, easy to install. That's it. Very, very simple. Now that would have been my 911 Carrera T. I think the current Carrera T is way beyond that. I can't get my colours. I could buy the car, take those really unnecessarily large and heavy 20-inch cast flow wheels off and put an aftermarket 19-inch wheel onto it. But I don't want to do that. I don't want aftermarket. I want OEM. I've got a new car. I'm in the bosom of my OPC. I may extend my 3 to 4 to the 4th year warranty. You know, I want to stay where I am. I want the loving embrace of my OPC. Why can't I use OEM parts? They don't exist. That's a mistake as well. So there you go. That ends my, it's hardly a rant, but my meanderings through how to build or brew a proper cup of Carrera tea. I hope it wasn't too boring. Hopefully Ed will be back in the chair and it won't be just me talking all the time next week or sometime in the not too distant future. Thanks for watching.